Good morning, everyone. I'm going to take this webinar on embedded systems and its boot up process, which is very basic for any embedded system, how it boots up any operating system. So just to give a brief introduction about myself, I have done my bachelor's in electronics and communication engineering. I have started my working with embedded platforms, basically automotive and networking platforms. So I have worked on bootloader, boot manager, and the board bring up topics, and even on the most critical SOC bring up also. So currently I'm working as a system engineer on the autonomous driving SOC. In the layman term, I am working for the CPU, which going to use in autonomous driving cars. This is about me. So totally 9+ years of experience in complete embedded systems, and mostly into the low level embedded system, which is very a critical code of any products which we are using today's world. This is about me. So let's come to the webinar right away without wasting any time. So embedded system and boot up process. So with this really, since all our day-to-day devices are now electronics based and handheld devices, so we all have a curiosity how these systems are designed and how these systems are coming up. So let us understand in this webinar about this. So I am covering mainly these are the contents through this webinar. So before I really go into the system boot up process, I want to touch upon what is this embedded systems, where they are using. So what types of embedded systems are available, and one small examples of widely used ARM-based SoC and its architecture, and how an embedded system is built, and what is the design process involved to design embedded system. And then once these are all basic understanding of embedded system which we clear about, then I would like to go on the topic of boot up process. So in the boot up process, so we'll discuss about what is bare metal systems and what is OS based systems, then how the microcontroller will start up, and how the full-fledged SoC or microprocessor will start up. What are all this about? What is the trending happening in these technologies? How critical this code against the attackers, and currently people are trying to hack the connected devices. So once knowing all these contents, we can still have a question and answer session on these topics. So before going there, we can also discuss about what are the opportunities in these embedded systems, because this 2020 to 2030 is a very crucial time on the designing this embedded system, because every type of device, every products are basically pushing towards the embedded solutions. So it's a golden era of, I think even from 2010 it was a golden era, but I think now the real need of more computing power, high performance computing, all is required. So what opportunities is there in front of us, and what is the real required trending skills? So there will be different types of skill sets are required to work on or to develop these platforms. So we will be discussing all this in this webinar. Okay, so interest to embedded systems. So as we all know, computer systems are everywhere. Like most of us think we have PCs, we have laptops, and we have data centers, servers. So all this, it comes to our mind when it comes to the computing systems. But there will be a computing system which is far more common than this. Far more today's world. Say for example, even our smartphone initially designed to for a communication purpose, for a call or communication, but now smartphone is no more a communication device. It do lot more than the what it is designed for. We can do a media, we can play games, we can do it for other purpose also. So I can think of smartphone is becoming another general purpose computing system now. It's alternative to the our desktop or our laptops. So most of the jobs are replaced in the smartphones. So but then what it is then, embedded system, yeah, yes, it is an electronics device, but how it differentiates. So to understand this, we should just simply very layman terms, we can think of general purpose versus specific purpose. So say I have a calculator. So what calculator does is just does a calculation for various operation. That's it. But you can have a computer to do a calculator also, right? So what differentiates? So use buying a computer and then do a calculator application open and do the calculation, or buying a just calculator. So if you understand this, I think we are clear that so we need to bring a product which serves the specific purpose. So that's all about the very basic understanding of embedded systems is a specific keyword. So it is built for specific purpose of computing. So so with that, I can clearly tell it is a combination of hardware plus software to do a specific applications. So what is the specific applications? These specific applications are very dedicated function, real time, and very predictive in natures. So all those are come under the embedded systems. For example, say if we consider car, and car, how you think now as it no more be just a mechanical system, it is a mechanical plus electronic system now. So how we say like this, say for example a simple braking system which we are using in our car, it is designed and controlled by an electronic control unit, so ABS. So with that ABS I can explain the real features of what is an embedded system. Say for example my computer hangs now, and I will restart and I use it for again, and I open my applications again. Say I am driving now and I am in middle of the road, and suddenly and uh, I had to brake for some some reasons immediately, right? So if it doesn't work at that time, it's a life saving life matter of life. So that means it's how critical it is. It should there is no room for failures. That means it should be a deterministic nature. Means I had to apply brake, I should apply brake. That's why we should be very careful to design the systems just to do the same job without any other diversions. So this is one of the very salient feature of the embedded system, is very deterministic, very real time. So and also built for particular application. So I think this clarifies all of us. An embedded system is just a combination of hardware and software and to do a specific application. This is what the concept of embedded systems evolved, and we have been making small machines in our day-to-day life, like our, as I said, our anti-lock brakes, our earlier phones, our battery chargers, or our temperature sensor or factory control devices, all small, our cameras. Say, for example, I can use a smartphone as a camera. Now it's evolving technology, but I can use a DSLR specifically built for photos and media. So there is a difference between the output of these two. So this is how the focus is goes to main purpose. In DSLR, focus is goes to only for the capturization, get the very effective minute details of the photos to attract more good. But when we consider as a smartphone, it is more other than just taking photos. So this is how we can really segregate these two general purpose and specific purpose computing systems. So I think we have evolved so much that so every device around us is, we can think of it as an embedded system, right? So for example, an average middle class home may have 40 to 50 embedded processor, right? Or dryer, dishwashers, or refrigerators, TVs, and sound systems, everything we can think of. If we really, as an electronics engineer, if you look, there is a software plus there is an hardware, and it is doing particular applications. So and also if you think of cars now, even from ignitions, airbags, brakings, window control, door controls, everything is built upon small embedded systems. Even if you think of our computers now, current computers, say we have a mouse, so mouse has its own firmware, keyboard has its own firmware, and internal controllers, bus controllers, or hard drive controllers. These are all put together, small embedded systems. Now we made a general purpose computers. So this is also a mouse firmware is specifically built for to just to recognize the movement and give the output to the computer. So these are all the way we can look upon these embedded systems, what is happening. So now, so knowing all this, what are the devices we are seeing in our around world? So if I say uh, um, current computing power, it's not at all essential for this going era of AI and machine learning. So there is a need of new computing power. So the whatever we have high-end CPUs, and high-end processors on the phones, or high-end wearable sensor devices. So all these computing powers are going to be centralized now. So there will be a way to talk to each other and take an action upon that. So this is, so it is quite interesting now, especially for the next generation, and few of us we are going to work on embedded system. It will be a lot more than that what we thought, especially the connected words. So I think one application we can think of connected cars coming. So cars talk to each other, cars talks to data centers. It's like a moving data center. So we have a data centers highly maintained in some place of geographical location, but the car is like a high computing power which moves, and it should know every data while it moving. So think of the complexity involved, how much electronics are going to come inside. So it's, I think, beautiful to understand this embedded system, I think, from beginning. So now, uh, okay, we all talk about, okay, this is embedded system. It has so many things. So for my view, we can actually see in this pyramid what is actually embedded system contains. So at the base, we have hardware layers actually. So I think there is no magic happens, right? So we should know there is no magic happens in whatever we see technology. It's not a magic. It is built, quietly designed, and it's a human discovery. So once we know there is no magic at God's creation, so so all things are happening from hardwares actually. So whether it is a cloud based, whether it is a enterprise based, other whether it is a on premises based, whether it is a edge based. Edge means a phone, right? It's just a phone here, or anything edge devices. So there is no magic happening. So then who is the main guy who is doing all this hardwares actually? So hardware, there are microcontrollers available, microprocessors, and now we have a concept of SoC, system on chip. So I think this is a visualization of entire system on single chip. I mean, bringing the entire system design into the single chip. So we have memories. All reason for this improvement is memory. Memory become cheap, because earlier days, all the memory is so expensive. Memory technologies, we are difficult to afford MBs of data. So all the software development and system design in the KBs of data. Now memories become cheap, it's affordable. So we have a GBs, terabytes of data. So memory is one of the reason to evolve in these embedded systems. Then we have various ports, peripherals coming to picture, different peripheral technology happened. So even in power supply. So basically, to summarize, hardware sits at the very low end of the embedded system, which is not seen to any people, but the real things are happening from hardware, because uh, to say we are pushing most of our software jobs to hardware now, because hardware performs most faster than software. So to know this, in the embedded systems, say ARM, Intel x86, so say we know, right, Intel processors and IBM processor and ARM processor, right? All our phones are Snapdragon based. Then why ARM, all our phones are not Intel based? Obviously we get all these questions. So if I say most of the handheld devices, smartphones are ARM based. Okay, I think you are all curious why it is ARM based, why not other processing system, like we have a Intel x86 based processor on all our higher end computers and all our servers everywhere, but why it doesn't run a simple mobile? So there is a real need of power coming to picture, a low power design. So ARM is very good at low power design. So that's why they are able to reach the market of smartphones and any handheld devices. So, and but that doesn't mean that Intel processors are not good, but they are very high speed, and they're into the there is into the systems where very high computing is required. It's not a power is constant like our laptops and all. We connect to AC charge, and power is not a much issue, because if each, okay, I'll go about what is this computing power, where is actually it's wasting in the later stages, to understand in a very layman term. But before that, so battery technologies remain same whether you use ARM or Intel. So ARM, what it does is basically it consumes very less of power to execute each instruction in CPU. So it starts from all there, how much power it takes to execute an instruction. So why it takes less power and all we'll talk about later. That's how we can think of. So just for now, Intel x86 or multiple power architecture available. We can also say instruction set architecture ISA. So there will be few people who really makes the instructions for the embedded systems. Those are all these guys, Intel x86 and all. Then once we have hardwares, then we should have some particular tools. We should know the tools also. So like cross compiler. So what are this cross compiler means, to build an application to particular target, we use this cross compilers. And we have a assembler, which I'll talk about later. What is assembler, linkers, flash programmer, what is this flash programmer. So these are all available tools currently and widely used in industry to develop an embedded application. This will sit above the hardware, which will help us to generate a code uh, to execute on hardware. Then we have a hardware, we have a tools, then we need a language, a programming languages, right? So we use assembly, C++ and Python now in the industry widely to develop these embedded applications. So as we all know, I think C is the best programming language to talk to hardware. Assembly is the best, but so it is difficult to write with knowing the complete hardware architecture. Then only we can write, and forget about machine code. So machine code is really difficult to understand by human. That's why we all build this tools, cross compiler, assembler, to convert our code into the particular target memory, or target CPU. Then at the end we see end apps where it's like, okay, these apps are doing all crazy things, but it's not apps are doing, these are all involved these things. So for us to understand these embedded systems, we should, I think, have a very good at least brief idea about in each of this layer. So each of this layer have their particular state of art technologies and job opportunities. Like one man can't work on all these, right? So there are people, hardware companies like pre-silicon companies like Intel, Qualcomm, Nvidia, or many companies, right? There are Texas Instruments. These are the companies who are memory means, you can see Seagate, Western Design. All these companies are working on the hardware layer. And there are companies like ARM, there are vendors working on the compiler developments. There are companies working on the environment to develop the softwares, IDEs, debuggers, all those things. And there are companies who uses all this from all these people and develop a um, end application and product and delivers to the markets. So each of this layer, each of these topics has their own scope and own credits. I think knowing all these ones as a early engineers in embedded system, it's really good. And then going to specific area is a good way to start. So now, as a introduction, I want to touch upon one basic SoC architecture. I mean, microprocessor or microcontroller. You can see nowadays we use the term of SoC. So I would like to just all you to know about this one. So later you can study in detail about this um, SoC architecture, because it's never ends, the most complex. I took a simple ARM based SoC. So what is SoC, right? So SoC is a system on chip. So as name tells, a system built on chip. So earlier, say for example, if you say our computers, so we have a microprocessor, then we have a RAM extra, and then we have a hard disk, then we have all the peripherals built on the motherboards. So and based on the application, based on the usage we want, we attach different type of motherboard peripherals. And the common CPU will be there, common processor, that is called traditional processor earlier. So we externally feed the system. But now when we visualize the system, and the technologies are so evolved, the entire system is trying to build inside a chip. So what is this means? So for a system, what it needs, say for system, it needs the processor first, CPU, right? So CPU will be there inside a chip. And then it needs a memory like code flash and RAM. So RAM will be there, there will be entire memory controller inside. Then there will be, if you see here, so we have a CPU, then we have a memory controller, then we have a mm, various peripherals which is needed for today's application, like CAN for automotive applications, USB for every plug and play things, and we have timers, then we have a SPI to talk to storage divider, then you have Ethernet. So I think so most of the available peripheral which talks to external world, so we have embedded within a chip, and we have a programmable controllers which is actually very needed, like clock controller, watchdog controller, and power on reset, various system controller. So put together all these communicates by internal connect bus, say ARM uses peripheral bus for peripheral connection, and the advanced system bus to talk within a modules inside a chip. So we just need to visualize there is a chip, the chip has this module like CPU, and it has internal connect logic called bus. For bus, lot of bus basically it's a as a layman term is a transport media, right? So it transports the data between these modules internally. Then there will be a peripheral data controller. So so I think with this we can see entire system we can build using this type of SOCs. That's why we we good to know this about SOC. Now most of the applications are built with SOC because this reduces the size actually. So it will be entire complexities built uh, within a chip. So in a secure few chip will have all these things. So and so if you see ARM as an example, so this a widely used technology in the entire embedded industry and IoT application, IoT based devices. So I think if you see these are the three various CPU architecture ARM supports. It's like they have a A profile product line, they have a R profile product line, they have a M profile product line. So to understand this, they have a series of CPUs. So they generally use in high-end high-end computation like mobile phones, right? Our Snapdragon uses a series of ARM-based CPUs, and even our driverless car SoCs, whoever wherever it is high computation required, they use a series of ARM processor like Cortex A. Then we have R profile, Cortex R series like R5, R7, R8. These are very real time in nature, which is very important in embedded systems. But it is not that much of higher end performance is required, but it is very deterministic device, especially in the automotive, medical systems, and aerospace and military technologies, right? So we use um, ARM Cortex R-based CPUs. Then coming to the M profile, so M profile is mostly on the power side. So like we need more. It's a combination of real-time plus power efficient. So like our wearable sensors, our smart home based products, or our small communication sensors. So which all use simple M profile based CPUs. So I think to say hundreds of billions now, I think devices are built over this ARM. So an embedded system, I think this is the one of the great one of the must skill to know if you want to build have a career in embedded systems, ARM architecture. So why this ARM is so popular, especially in the mobile devices or in the embedded system IoT based devices, means it's all because of this risk. So what is this risk? Like we all know about, there are two types of system: risk versus CISC. Risk means reduced instruction set architecture, and right. So reduced instruction set architecture means we have only few instructions. So and they do a specific job. So if we know the very reduced instruction or basic instructions, it is easy to predict the time it takes to execute. It's not like it does a multiple jobs. In case of x86 instructions are complex, those are CISC based. So like generally instruction means what it does. Generally it reads to memory, writes to memory based on the ALU operations, right? So if we really understand the pipeline of instruction executes, it boils down to memory read and write. So we have a load and store architecture in ARM. What does it load and store is it writes to device and read from a devices and from the memory using register contents. It doesn't directly go and write to the memory. I think these are the very salient features of CISC architecture, which enables ARM to become famous in the low power embedded systems. Yeah, so simple addressing modes. Any processor we want to learn, we should learn about architecture. What are the addressing mode it supports? What are the register sets, program counter, stack pointer? So these are all the basics. So ARM is really uses the very reduced instruction set. So these are all deterministic nature. It takes a less power and a less deterministic way of computing the each operation in the ALU, if we say. So I think this is about the ARM. Now, right now we'll come to the almost we are understood what is an embedded system and how they are built and what are the components are involved in embedded systems. Now with this, like, so we know, right, for example, if a merchant or if a common man wants to have a software, he generally click a exe file, right? In the Windows architecture or the computer system, we know .exe is the software. When we click, and there will be a setup file which setups the software and install to work on the laptop. But it doesn't happen like that in embedded system. There will be a different way to build an embedded application or system. So it is a but multiple stages involved. So I want to just briefly tell how the embedded application is built. So there will be a lot of C files or H files or the C++ files which are pre-processed first. There will be pre-processing thing will come, and this will generate the intermediate files, which is actually a compiler actual C file to go into apply for compilation. Then there will be compilers are there. As I said, there will be compilers, cross compilers. The cross compilers will apply the language rules on those software files which we written for a particular application, and generate the assembly file. So this, what are these assembly files? So these assembly files are actually instruction sets like move, add. It's a actually operation which is happening in arithmetic and logical units. So move, add, compare, jump. So all these are the operation which will happen in a software. So assembly code contains this one. This assembly codes is target to a processor, very tied to a underlying architecture. That's why we don't directly write a code now at the moment on the assembler, because it's very hard to know the architecture and write a software. So we write in a general high level language, and our assembler help us to convert into the target specific assembly code. Then we have assembly code. Then what happens? So assembly codes, say for example, I have a small ARM based chip which I use for my refrigerator. So that means the finally the ARM based microprocessor or microcontroller which is going to run this code. Then we have to link all this object file to build for that actual hardware target. So then with the help of linker, you will build a X file or the L file. So this is actually executable in case of embedded system. So like exe in the traditional Windows system, X file or L file is the executable file, a final binary we say in embedded system. So this is a procedure, is a combination of all these steps, pre-processing, compilation, assembling and linking, and we get a final software, that means X file. And we have a lot of tools available to do this. Lot of companies are doing, like, we don't have single C file, right? There will be hundreds of thousands of files are involved in each product. So there will be a build tool systems, there will be build tool technologies. Traditionally we have GNU, make EPP, make and technologies. So these are all the concept we should also know how the system is built, how the application is built using a build tools. So there is a huge research is going to reduce the build time and for the development. So now there are Python based software also coming. So the most famous is make utility, but there are vendor specific or proprietary build tools also available. Okay, so with this I can say there is no magic happening. So zeros and ones we say, right? Zeros and ones is computer understanding. How it directly relate, right? Zeros and ones means it is a machine code. If you put together say 32-bit architecture, if we say, so the machine code like 0111 will be translated to a instruction, opcode, assembly like move or something. So that move is actually output of one of our C operations, C code. It happens all like that. So finally, when we have a zeros and ones on our memory, when the program counter reads and gives to the CPU for execution through the instruction fetch register, basically decodes and understand what assembly it is, what opcode it is, what operation it has to do, and executes. This is the actually beauty in the embedded system. So CPU reads the zeros and ones and club together based on the architecture and understand what instruction it is and perform the operation in ALU. Operation performance involves a read write to the memory, that is load and store instruction. This is all happening. So zeros and ones, when we understand in very beginning, computer understands zeros and ones. These zeros and ones are not zeros and ones, is actually instructions or the opcodes of a particular CPU. That's it. So this is a very basic to know, and I think good to know in detail about these steps. And once we have a X file generated, so we will load the, say for example, in the picture I have shown, there is one simple embedded board, and it has a connector through JTAG cable, and it connects to one USB device that connects to PC. So basically we flash the memory using this JTAG file. Means flash means it's like loading the this X file to the memory of our microcontroller, then release it, right? So what happens once we load it? Say we develop a software, and we generate a X file, then we use the various flash programmer, supported flash programmer to the particular target board, and we flash that to the memory, microcontroller memory, and then we release, right? So then what happens, how its system starts, like we should always curious to understand how the system starts first. It is the most critical part of embedded system. Like we switch on the phone, from the power on, what happens, we switch on the laptops, we switch on the any fridge. Like power is the basic component to run, like it's like a life, right? Like we switch on the fridge, we switch on the TV. What happens it um, before comes up? So this is what I am going to explain now. uh, so how it boots, what is basically in the technology term we call booting process. So how it boots, right? Generally we say we use very high end CPUs and high speed, right? When it start it should end, right? But it doesn't end. So it runs till we switch off. That means so there is a way or logic involved to run continuously, right? Unless we are supplied the power to it. So so before I think I just summarize what are the steps involved in the embedded system designs. So we know the requirement, we should think of requirement and what system architecture to use, what operating system to use, whether it's RTOS or general purpose or a simple scheduler, and what processor to use, what peripheral required. All this is all the groundwork to understand. Once we have the groundwork done, we choose the platform to development and code, and then test and the host system and the target system, and then finally we release or deploy to the market with the mass production. So many people are involved, some system architectures roles are involved in the early stage to choose this, and there are a lot of developers are involved to develop based on the system requirement already frozen, and there is a testers involved. So each of the stage has multiple job roles. So this is I think this 8 steps is I think which I made here is I think is one way of looking into the requirement till the product is built. Now okay, so now let's start about booting. So boot means what? So boot means it's starting the system, right? So in the system term, in the computer term, it's loading an operating system to the memory. So what is loading actually? So generally when you power off, I think nothing is there, right? When you, as soon as we power on, we load. Generally in our C drive we have a uh, OS install, and it loads to RAM and runs. This is what we understood for booting. But in the embedded system, there are two types of systems: bare metal system and the typical operating system based system. So metal system is something like we have hardware and we have one application written on top of it. It's like while one based directly the application talks to hardware. there is no operating system is involved to manage this. Just if you consider as a while one, always true loop will be there in the bare metal system. But in the typical OS based system, there will be a OS in between, which talks to hardware from application. Like Linux is there, Windows kernel is there, IO is there. These are the OS which is act as a intermediate layer with hardware and application written on top of it. So but any system, whether it is a typical OS based system or the bare metal systems, any system, we should know what is booting in the both the systems. So let us start understanding from bare metal systems. So simple applications like temperature control or our basically a small embedded IoT based devices, right? So where it has to do a particular tasks, and based on the event based, just polling for some event and do it. So it's all comes under bare metals. Even like bootloaders, right, which we are going to discuss today, it is bare metal system. It starts and does some particular jobs on hardware and ends simple, and give a control the next one. So it doesn't need much operating system to be there, right? So so when we power on, so what happens when we power on? Actually, we all know all our execution start from main, but no, it's not always start from main. Before main, a lot of activities will happen. So that means from the time of power on till the control goes to main. Main means your first application in your software. There are a lot of activities happen in the hardware level. So let's discuss on that. So we power on the system. When we power on the system, what happens is we have a interrupts in the microprocessor or controller. So what is that is called power on reset. So which is actually stored in the code flash. Actually, code flash means, if you see, our software is flashed into this flash area. That means this flash contains the complete software, including our power on. So when we power on reset takes the control. So what is power on reset? The power on reset is, um, is a simple interrupt vector start address which is stored in non-volatile memory. That means internal code flash. And why always it goes to the that location? Like we always curious to know, right? So when we power on, uh, it is hardwired in the hardware to program pointer to point to the power on reset address. Say for example, my power on reset address is 0x000. So in the memory, as we switch on the system, whether it is a car or any embedded system, the control goes to the zeroth address of the um, memory. That means generally where we place the power on reset vector. So if we see, this is a software. When we build the software, this is the memory map is going to available. Like we have a code segment means our text. So what we written in a code, all the instructions are called text. What are datas means all the datas which is needed in the instructions are executed. So data segments mostly are the initialized data is going to, so like int a is equal to 0, we put, right? This is the initialized value. The initialized value is going to data segment. And we have uninitialized global variables and things, right? So these all be part of the BSS. Then we have heap, free space, and stack. So stack is basically local variables. I'll just give a brief. This is a big topic, but I'll give a brief. Stack means local variable. Local variable means all our internal to the function scope. Those all go to stack. And heap is mostly less used in embedded system, and because embedded systems is deterministic, there won't be much memlocks, mlocks and all these are all for dynamic memory allocation. Leave as of now about like dynamic memory allocation. In the static allocation, we have a stack and we have a BSS. So BSS is like in-type global variables, right, or static variable which are not initialized. Those are all going to BSS. So and then we have initialized values. So initialized values means whatever the global variables or static variables we initialized in the code in our software, that will be part of our data segment. Then what is this text segment? Text segment is actual instruction containing segment. So our power on reset vector also is a part of code segment. So if we see this is a small 32-bit memory space, say x0 xx to fff which I written, right? So here zeroth address there will be a reset vector. So what is this reset vector? So in the what it contains, there are multiple interrupts also available in ARM or any type of system architecture or processor architecture, but we know undefined instruction, abort, prefetch, so a lot of, so let's not discuss about other interrupts. So we'll talk about reset, which is a highest priority interrupt. So we know, right, we power on, control comes to the reset. So when control comes to the reset, what it will do, it will actually have a reset handler. A reset handler is something like ISR. So it's a function. So control jumps to the reset function actually. So from zeroth it goes to reset function. Then the reset function, it is actually a function, general function, generally written in C, written in assembly, sometimes in some system written in C also. um, uh, okay. So uh, so the PC jumps to reset handler and perform initialization sequence data for C runtime to environment. Yes. So PC jumps to reset, and before running the C, see, we are not at we powered on, we have not yet reached the main. We are in between the transition. So we are at the zeros address. From the zeroth we move to reset. Actually this all this happening because we have execute in place memory, we have NAR flash. So NAR type of memory, code flash is NAR flash, internal code flash. So it is executing from the same address. So it reads the execute in place means it reads from the flash and store in the flash, means store and read happening in the same place. So it read from flash and execute, right? So that's why all these instructions are executed from RAM. This bootloader code should be written, should be loaded in the RAM. Otherwise it will go away when the power off. So it should be there in the RAM, and the program counter should point to that address and say, I clearly I mentioned here, this is something the startup code looks like. There will be a start. Start means is a entry symbol. See, if you see B means reset, something like this. Then we have arm undefined, arms is color. So this is just a snippet of other interrupt handler. So reset comes, and what actually I put a what reset functionality does. Reset will do disable all interrupts, set up CPU registers, and initialize the CPU registers is very required, R0 to R12 or whatever the CPU register. We need a stack pointer for all the local variable access and function calling. And we also see, and say for example, I have initialized data, as I said, I have initialized data in the software. So initialized data like int a is equal to 10 is initialized to 10, but I can change to 11, 12 during the course of programming, right? But the data which are stored in RAM we cannot change flash, right? I mean, we need to have a separate process for the variable runtime change. The variable should be in RAM. So that means the copies any initialized data from RAM to RAM will happen during startup. And then there will be a stage where we have to zeroth all the uninitialized data area. That means this BSS area will make it 0. Then we enable all interrupts. Basically during boot up process we don't want any interrupt, that's why we disable all interrupts first, then we enable and calls the main. Actually this is the very important topic. Before jumping to the main in C program, these are the things in happens in hardware level. But when we are running in the C computer and all learning C, this won't be taught, it won't be understood, because it is just an executable type we run. But when we understand this in the in a embedded target, when we run, when we load our application or see output to the embedded target, this all the steps will happen before control comes to main. The main will be the first function in C code. So okay, so then who have this code now, who is the main code? So the primary bootloader or application is having this main code. So so then the primary bootloader will loads the application and control will be given to the application. So I just explained in the example of Linux booting how it happens. So this happens in the bare metal system. So power on reset happens, control comes to reset, and it does the basic required operation to run the C runtime environment code, and control gives to main, and main having the application code. This is called bare metal systems. But if you see the full-fledged OS, like say OS based system means it is having a bootloader, then it is having a OS, Linux, Android, or Windows, then we run the application on top of this OS, right? Then the bootloader is something different in that part. So what bootloader in that part is basically is a multi-stage bootloader. So what is multi-stage bootloader means? First stage will do load the other stage, and the next stage will load the other stages. It keep happens like that until we reach the application. So this picture represents this small I'm trying to portray how the booting happens. So as I said, BL0 in the bare metal, say BL0 directly jumps to application, but in the multi-stage BL0, which is part of our IRAM. So BL0, if you see in the architecture, BL0 will be stored in this flash. So when the power is on, the BL0 is coming to picture, and the BL0 will what it will do, the primary bootloader or the boot RAM we call in the current terminologies. The boot RAM will load the next level software from the RAM, from the SD card. Say SD card is our boot media, right? It identify the boot media. From the boot media, it copies this to the RAM. This RAM is internal RAM of SOC. So when it copies to the internal RAM of SOC, I mean a microprocessor or microcontroller, then the RAM will load the U-boot, the next level. How it happens, there is a lot of technologies involved, the markers or the involved. So BL1 load the U-boot, then U-boot reads the file system in the SD card, and load the Linux to the RAM. Then once the Linux is loaded to the RAM, it mounts the file system and run the first application on top of Linux. So basically, this is involved in the multi-stage application. So if you see in this here, there SOC RAM bootloader. RAM bootloader means the BL0. Then first stage bootloader, this is the BL1, and the second stage bootloader is called U-boot. So like our BL2. So this is actually architecture is supported now in the most of the products, even in Android phones, even in the Linux based application, in your various embedded platforms like driverless car, any advanced platforms which we are using. This is the boot architecture is supporting. We have a boot RAM, then we have a first stage bootloader called intermediate bootloader, then we have a second stage bootloader, and then we load the application. So all this works uh, with a very critical code. The critical code means these are all very important. If the system fails to boot up, means it's unusable, and entire purpose of building a system is gone. Like in case of PC, if it fails to boot up, you can repair. But say the embedded system is mounted inside the car and it fails to boot up, then how much is cost involved to bring that to garage and open the TCU or the electronic system and see what's happening. So very difficult to diagnose the booting process, what's happening. That's why this is the very important step of an embedded system. So first piece, so to summarize, it's the first piece of code to execute after power on. That means it's a root of trust. It's the first guy to execute in embedded system. So then once it is how it understand what to boot, where to boot, and all. So in the board we have something called fuses and straps. That means some markers. So it will actually marked what device is available, like say QSPI device or SD card, eMMC or USB boot. So it identify the what type of boot media available, and then first stage of bootloader, it loads from that boot media to the IRAM, right? So I think I'm trying to explain another picture like representation how it happens, same concepts. Just focus here. We have RAM bootloader, we have ML0, we have U-boot, then you have a init process kernel and init process, right? This is the multi-stage system. So RAM bootloader, as I said, right, it is reads the file system and the MMC SD card. RAM booter takes the power on the reset, initialize the system, comes to main, and then reads the what is the boot device. Very small code, very KBs of code is written to know understand this. Then it reads, there is a partition available in the SD card, and it will read only the first ML0, something like memory loader, to the internal RAM. then the control will pass to internal RAM. Basically, control is pass. Control is given to here. Um, then when control pass to here, next software will get activated. Then next software will read the SD card, understand the next stage of booting software. Basically, U-boot, there will be UFI supported bootloaders. There will be different types of flavors are available in the booting stages. So say U-boot is one of the widely used bootloader. So it will read the U-boot to the RAM. RAM means DRAM. This is actually not part of our SOC, not part of our microprocessor. It's outside RAM which we connected. So are the actual RAM which in SOC case there are sometimes we have RAM interfaces. So it goes to RAM, then control given to the U-boot. Then U-boot reads the again SD card and find out the Linux and Linux file system, and it loads to the RAM, and control given to the Linux. Then it mounts the root file system, and init process will be launched. Then user space program will start. This is actually the boot process of a embedded systems. But now we know why all this architecture, why these multiple stages are involved. Why can't we directly load the I just have a question. Why do we need this first stage bootloader? Why can't it directly load the U-boot to iram? And also, why don't we directly load this U-boot to directly to the DRAM? Why we need the internal bootloader? I think why we need this, basically why we need these stages. To answer this question, so RAM bootloader is part of SOC. So part of SOC means it is internal to chip, right? So internal to chip, if you want to increase the size, so it is actually minimum memory which is needed to boot, handle the system specific initialization things, the CPU specific initialization. So it's a very cost to increase the RAM and RAM inside the microprocessor. Even one register increase also leads lot of architectural change, lot of cost involved. So that's the reason generally U-boot is big in size, which knows all the various type of RAMs available in the market, various right. So we cannot bring all that code to the RAM bootloader. That's why we load uh, the simple memory loader to the internal RAM, which is small software. The small software knows about only U-boot, the next boot media. Then once control given to the U-boot, then we are in the bigger RAM space. A lot of memory is there, lot of resources is available. Then we can load any operating system. I think this is the way even in computer happens when we power on our laptops also. So there will be a boot RAM code execute from Intel processor. Then we see a small code which is called BIOS. The BIOS checks the basic file systems and everything, and do the post power on test. Then it will allow the OS to load, like Linux kernel or Unix or Linux or the Windows then launch the application. This happens. But anything breaks during this system, that means you need to really look into the system and diagnose. But in the embedded system case, we cannot look with, there is no room to fail and product to not work in the field, right? Like I said, ABS or military systems, which it fails sometime in booting for some reason, it's gone. So to avoid this, actually we have a lot of research is going on this bootloader topic. So just that one of the topic is secure boot. So what is this secure boot means? Every software year or every stage of booting software are encrypted and signature based. That means each one we data is encrypted and we decrypt and verify, am I really loading the authenticated software from an authenticated source? Because there are hackers who change the code and who corrupt the system. That means then you end up in for example, right, to say if RAM bootloader if corrupted, you have to throw the hardware. You cannot get it away, get it recovered anytime, because it is internal to chip. It is fabricated in the IC design process or microprocessor design process. So if this corrupted, means gone. Anyway, there is less possibility to correct it. But even this part of software, when we are loading, we should always uh, check is a proper software, and by looking into the signatures. So now we have a concept called root of trust. Means each from the boot RAM, it goes till the application. Boot RAM is a root of trust. Same means it's the beginning of trust. It will load the next software say BL0 next stage bootloader and authenticates and verifies it's a proper software with various technologies, a cryptographic algorithm, then only control will be passed to the next one. Similarly, the second software will load the next one. So this is the very very required and most research is going on in this technology when it comes to the booting. So the cryptographic algorithms are used, and we make sure we are actually uh, putting properly without any attacks or without any hacking to the system. This is actually fail proof system in the booting steps. So now I know we talked about little about embedded systems and only brief of what is booting, what is actually happening in bootloaders, bare metal and OS based bootloaders. Then so knowing all this, there are a lot of opportunities in this system now. So like board bring up engineer. We need an embedded software now. Self-driving cars applications are coming. A lot of people are needed. There is a automotive specific AUTOSAR developers, then IoT based embedded solutions, then pre-silicon work in companies like Intel, Qualcomm, Nvidia, all the pre-silicon companies, the product company like Bosch, Continental, and any product companies are working Amazon, Google. Then there is a ASIC engineer who builds the application specific thing. There are bootloader engineers to develop the startup code. Then so lot of opportunities are there in these systems. So in these platforms. So embedded is now no more is a small thing. It's a very complex and multi-domain skills. So a lot of job opportunities are there in the all type of companies. There is no companies now is excluded from this. Most of the companies, product companies are having the opportunities in embedded systems. So lot of opportunities, that means a lot of demand also for skills, right? So what skills actually we should know to work here and on these topics, right? So computer architecture is very basic. We should know what is computer architecture and what is CPU, microprocessors, microcontroller, how they are connected. Then we should know how bootloader will come up, and like how the board can be bring up, and what are the cryptographic security measures are taking care. So these are the trending skills actually. Self-driving algorithm developer also very someone is very good at coding. He doesn't want to understand the much about hardware, or you just want to understand the performance of an algorithm is written. There are algorithm developer, there are middleware, hypervisor is called middleware software which are coming which talks with Linux, Windows, AUTOSAR, RTOS, like multiple types of OS. This communicates, right? So correct, for example, our car dashboard, if you consider it as navigation system, the navigation systems will talk to the different type of OS, right? So then there is IoT applications. So I think a lot of different types of skills required. It's a vast domain. I think next 10 to 20 years, I think a lot of engineers needed in the embedded domain. So whatever the computing power, whatever the technologies are having all rewritten. So we're all rewriting our softwares to support the next level of applications, not the traditional systems now, AI and ML powered systems now. I think with this, I think um, I am done with my short webinar on this topic. I think, yeah. Thank you, Indira. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.